right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. State of the Nation begins right now, and it's all about by-elections and the road to 2027. And we have the IEBC Commissioner here, Anne Nderitu, is with us. Thank you for making time. CPA Professor Elizabeth Kalunda is the chairperson, ISPAC. Thank you for making time. Arnold Maliba is the party leader, Progress Plus Alliance. Asante sana for making time. And Ben Mulwa, the Secretary General, National Economic Development Party. Thank you very much for making time. And Prof, I'll start with you on this before we bring in the IEBC to do their own assessment. Just about 2 weeks ago, IEBC conducted by-elections in almost 22 polling areas. What is your assessment of their performance?
Okay, thank you, Trevor, for this opportunity. And my comments in these discussions actually are going to be framed on the fact that I'm the chair of the institute, and our institute is more on financial integrity. So looking at how IEBC performed in the recent by-election, one, from a financial integrity point, we want to say that there were quite a number of election offenses related to finances, which, one, the fine that is currently being charged of 1 million, which I'm happy that they were able to enforce, is actually not equivalent to the losses that were there. You can imagine paying 1 million and lives have been lost. Again, this in a way makes politicians who have financial muscle to actually easily pay that amount. So from that, one, there's a miss and a hit in terms of the enforcement, but the amount needs to be revised. In terms of ensuring that public officers are not taking part in this election, I think this is something that they need to be empowered and they need to take action. We saw a lot of government machinery that was on the ground, and looking at the current financial status of the country, I think that was a really misappropriation, misuse, and something that needs to be checked. And for an institute that is meant to look at financial prudence, that is something that needs to be addressed. Again, looking at just maybe from an operational point, I would want to give a plus to IEBC because most of the maybe materials that were needed were there on time on the ground, but the issues were outside the election, maybe the centers, because we know election is a process just before you put in your ballot. There's so much that happens outside. So we need to see how IEBC can be able to ensure that the whole process from the beginning to the end is actually a process that has integrity. And for me, I would say that that was a litmus test. We have the major elections coming in 2027, and there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done, and especially on regulations that are pending between now and that time. And looking at the time frame and knowing how laws are enacted and even tested, we find that there's a gap there. So we request IEBC and the legislators to ensure that there's fast tracking of some of this law, and definitely they should pass the process, otherwise they are going to be contested. Yeah, so it's fair to look at things from the two sides, the hits and the misses.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll get into the improvements in terms of regulations, but let's just get a general idea of what your sense is, Ben, in terms of how they performed as IEBC in the by-elections.
Well, first we must appreciate that this was the first elections the new commission was undertaking. And this was after vacancies in that office for a very long duration, which delayed a lot of places from getting representation, either in the county assemblies or in the Senate or in the National Assembly. One thing came out very clearly, that there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of election preparedness and in terms of the delivery of election processes on the D-Day. We witness, and this cuts across, on the one hand, the participants, who include the politicians and the citizenry, and on the other hand, and most importantly, the IEBC, the referee, who is supposed to be an independent arbiter, especially in a disputed contest like what we saw. As Prof indicates, there was a very worrying trend that we saw of the deployment of government machinery, and there is necessity to distinguish between the role of government in service delivery to the people and the link political parties from utilizing government machinery, especially through intimidation and frustrating opponents. We saw that prominently in Malava. We saw that very prominently in Bere. That was very disappointing. And if that is what the government seeks to pursue in 2027, then every Kenyan who is seeking to participate in those elections has a reason to worry. My assessment, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give the IEBC a 6 because there are cases, or there has been a lot of allegations of a lot of interference, especially at the tail end towards the tallying. But in terms of preparedness, I think they did an excellent job. In terms of getting the stations running and working on time, that was a good thing. But I think there's a lot of room, and I think it was a very important learning moment for the IEBC. We are gearing up to more by-elections, actually, I believe, early next year once the gazettement is done, and we expect to see better performance. But most importantly, the political participants need to rise to the occasion. As much as ultimately every political party seeks to win an election, the deployment of unorthodox means that we saw, especially the intimidation that came even from cabinet secretaries and prominent persons in government, must come to an end. Cabinet secretaries are state officers, and if you check Article 74 of the Constitution of Kenya, it is clear in terms of the participation in electoral processes, and also Article 193 of the Constitution. So it will be tragic to witness that trend going forward.
Okay.
Yes.
Maliba, your assessment?
I think generally IBC, the Secretariat, are always ready for elections. At least since I've been actively involved in politics for quite a while, since 2013, I think the Secretariat per se, they are quite good with elections because there's nothing systemic in the framework that has actually changed. The election is still the same, the ballot was won. So if it's just the basic drill, the Secretariat is good. What I think I find a little bit of a challenge is one thing that probably would come to all of us as opposed to necessarily packing it with IBC, that if you do away with deputies or running mates, you have got 1,882 elections to conduct in a general election. When we go to an election, in a general election, we've got 1,882. That's if I'm not going to count the deputy president and the deputy governors. Now, IBC was taking care of 24 by-elections. 2 of them were non-contest because literally there was simply one candidate running. That is about, generally let's talk about, that is 1.27% if you are to compare to a general election. So we are looking at the 1.2% against the bigger picture. So how it works out. I'd love to look at it differently. Number one, out of the 24 polling, or rather by-elections, on the election day, 10 out of 24, from media reviews, we had serious incidents of violence. 10 out of 24. That is 41%. You can extrapolate that and check this out. If 41% of Kenya got into serious issues on an election day, there's no combined security formation that can take care of that. None. So, and that is not entirely an IBC issue. It is a bigger problem, a bigger societal problem. So for me, I look at it from a point where if that is an indicator of where we are going, that 41% had serious incidents. If you just check out, if you do media monitoring, out of 24, 10 had serious. I'm not talking about the minor ones. We're talking about where there was proper pressure. And remember, that day they only had got 1 ballot. You walk in as you go out, not the traditional 6 ballots that you go through. So for me, that is something that we need to start thinking about. That if from this 1.27%, 41% of it ended up in issues. And remember, all regions of Kenya except for central Kenya had. So IBC had literally a touch of every place in the country. There was a by-election in literally all the regions except central Kenya. That's where there was no by-election. So literally it was a good run for them. So for me, that is the first place where I get a little bit worried. Two, if you were to look at numbers again, in 2022, we had 64% voter turnout. And I point that out because, of course, this will look like it's a small issue. The county that had the highest voter turnout was Baringo with 80% in 2022. In the by-election, I think Baringo had the lowest by-election. Purko ward in Kajiado, I think, had the highest voter turnout with about 78%. Actually, in Purko ward, more people voted in the by-election than they voted in the general election. Incidentally, in Baringo, we had about 17 to 18% voter turnout. Yet Baringo was the county with the leading voter turnout in 2022. Mombasa, of course, had the lowest, I think, with 44%. That speaks to one thing. It speaks to a trend that has actually happened since let's talk from 2017, and probably we need to have a bold conversation about it. In 2017, 79%, I think 79.51% of the registered voters turned out to vote. Mm-hmm. That was slightly over 15 million. In 2022, we had 14 million people turning up to vote. Actually, the difference between 2017 and 2022 is 1.2 million people didn't show up to vote. As in, that's a very big number. We're talking about, remember, in 2022, we had lesser registered voters, number one. In 2017. In 2022, you expect generally, out of the demographic imperatives, that there would be, number one, more registered voters, and definitely, even the basic numbers should be higher. But 1.2 million people did not show up. 1.2 million people less did not show up to vote. So, as we continue to talk about...
Is that entirely an IBC issue, though?
No. Again, it's much bigger than IBC. You know, a lot of times when we are going to talk about the election, you look at the electoral cycle, we put a lot of emphasis on the EMB, the Electoral Management Body, which is IBC in this particular case. But there's much more, because a lot of times when people turn out to vote for different reasons. Someone would just show up to vote for, like if you were to look at Purko ward, for example, if more people turned out to vote in the by-election than they turned out to vote in the general election, what does that tell you? Probably a clan rivalry. As in when the stakes are higher. So people turn up to vote for different reasons. Okay. Somebody else will turn up for governor. So there's a little bit of work to do. But for me, I am actually interested in the issue to do with security. That is not entirely their business. And I say that because at the peak of the Gen Z demonstrations, if you look at all the numbers, at the highest point, we had about 100,000 people causing that paralysis. I'd love you to actually try and internalize what 41% of this country actually going octane. Do you really have a country? No one in this country. Even if you are to combine all the security agencies, you cannot call back the country. Okay. It's something that we need to actually have a conversation on. Okay. Yeah.
Let me hear what the Commission has to say. What is your assessment as the Commission, first of all, before you respond to the issues raised by the panelists?
Okay, thank you so much for having us in this breakfast meeting. First is to acknowledge that we had 22 by-election, given that the two were uncontested. I want to differ a bit with the percentage of where issues happened. To us, it's only in 6 areas where you can say something of happened. Meaning, if we had 22, if you remove 6, you remain with how many? 6 from 22. 16.
16, yes.
16, 17 elections went on smoothly, no incidents, and everything was okay. Then come to the technical part of it. Everything that was supposed to be done by the Electoral Commission was done. The voting happened, and everything that goes with an elections, including counting of votes, tallying and announcement, declaration of results, was actually done in time, and everything was as smooth. In the 16, everything went on well. But Kenyans are avoiding to speak about those 16 because you also need to give credit where it's due. But then concentrating on these 6, while we appreciate that that we really need to, all of us as Kenyan, work on the issues that have been raised, I want to separate the issues that are related to the election environment and the issues that are election related, which are IBC. So what went wrong in those 6 election environment? And the environment is a most stakeholder involvement. IBC does not do elections alone and cannot. An election is so big an activity to even be left to IBC alone. It's a national responsibility, it's a most stakeholder responsibility, and each and every stakeholder needed to play their part. And some of the issues that have been raised, and even by the panelists here, are actually, if you want to place them responsibility squarely, are actually other stakeholder related. Not to say that we detach ourselves as a commission from those issues, because they affect election. And but sometimes you wonder what IBC can do. For example, if politicians decide to wake up and hire goons, and political parties, and they are represented here, to hire goons, and the citizens themselves accept to be hired as goons, because these are not Ugandans or Tanzanians or people from the US. They're actually citizens of this country. They accept, I am a goon, and you carry that tag along, you carry a machete, you carry a paga, and you are actually going, your intention is even to cut your fellow citizen. And then you also bring IBC, even the goon is bringing IBC. And he has been hired to really want to interfere with the election. Yeah. The politician, and I've seen them even in the newspaper, they actually will talk more of IBC, because IBC is a softer ground to punch, is a softer bag that you can punch, and then you go away with it. You actually run away with it when you punch IBC. It becomes a song, and a nice song.
Are you saying there's nothing you can do as IBC?
No, I'm not saying there's nothing you can do. I'm driving there.
Yeah.
So it's also good, as we have this conversation this morning, to also know that there are some stakeholders that need also to take their stake. Now, externally, the external environment, what did IBC do and did? Number one, as was one of the panelists have said, when there was violence during campaign, we summoned, we actually effected the code of conduct, because there's a code of conduct. And we summoned quite a number of those politicians, and some of them were fined. As Madame Ispak says, she thinks probably the fine was soft, that more than it should be increased, the magnitude of what had been committed. But you also realize that violence is a criminal. It's criminal. And unless an investigation has been done and concluded, and responsibility has been assigned to whoever committed the criminal crime, you really cannot, as IBC, because you have no power to actually finish and prosecute criminal activities. So what we did, we looked at the electoral environment and what they caused, what caused it, and what was also brought before us was about the campaign schedule. These people, the reason why we charge them is because they were supposed to, after every nomination of our candidates, IBC and candidates sit down to agree on the campaign schedule. So these people decided to defy the campaign schedule. They decided to be where they were not supposed to be. And both of them made a decision to go to a venue, and they collided, and then their supporters collided. So our premises of fining them was based on a violation of campaign schedules. Not taking, they cannot, unless an investigation has been done, IBC cannot place criminal responsibility on individuals unless a whole investigation has been completed. And the
so
DCI,
your fines were not based on the lives lost in Gasipol. It was mostly about violation.
Yes, but that they participated in making the lives get lost in a way because they were where they were not supposed to be at that particular time. But the investigation is still going on of the person who actually did the killing, because by being in the wrong places.
Yeah.
That's why we actually address a code of conduct using the rules of the code of conduct.
So why not just an outright disqualification?
Mm-hmm. You cannot disqualify a person when that person, if you are disqualifying on basis that somebody died, then you could have waited for the report to come out. If the report, we had a report saying, the investigation saying this is how the killing happened, because they had different versions of where they were and what they did in that particular...
And that now lies with the police. And
that lies with the police, with the DCI.
Okay.
Yeah, that is why, because you cannot fight with no facts, because facts must be there so that we are able to punish a person. And you know, this country has laws that says a person must be allowed to prosecute all his matter and he must not be condemned unheard. So we could not condemn them unheard, especially on the criminal responsibility. So we looked at the electoral campaign schedule responsibility, that they actually moved from where they were supposed to be. So once the criminal responsibility has been placed on them, then even this what law says about a person who have been found guilty and convicted of a criminal activity. And that is the perspective. So we cannot just wake up and really just without justification. It will look like we are witch hunting. Yeah. There must be criminal responsibility placed on them. The second issue I want to say, when we talk of state resources, and it's a question of integrity also. Ours is to actually raise the matter, and we did raise the matter with the relevant authorities and condemned it. We also condemned violence. And we really said it is unprocedural, it's not necessary, because to me, even the cabinet secretaries themselves, whether they are public officers and everybody, must take responsibility. We cannot operate as if this country has no law governing how cabinet secretaries and public officers should behave in an election. So there must be personal responsibility also. This one is an ethics issue. So the institutions that also deal with ethics should come and help us also. As we condemn and we say this is wrong, our hearts are tied to the extent at which we can go in terms of prosecuting this matter, unless other institutions of government that have responsibility also come in. And I think mine is also to say the electoral environment must be an engagement of also the citizen, because we must change our software of how we looked at elections and how participation in election should be. Why, for example, should the same politicians that are looking for vote be the one actually discouraging people to come out and vote? Because the minute there's violence, those numbers will go down, because Kenyans, peace-loving Kenyans, and they are majority of them, will not want to come out to vote in an environment that is not conducive for peace. So generally speaking, I would say, let us work all together. IBC has a responsibility, we agree, but where we need stakeholder support and people coming out, and even as Arnold said, citizens themselves must take responsibility of their own country. Because imagine, even if you have so many police, and security agencies really sometimes very try to really contain the situation, but can you imagine if everybody riot and we have 100,000 police persons in this country, 100 and something police persons. We allocate only 2 police officers per polling station. And then you come as goons. These police officers are also human beings. They run for their life, because citizens, when they come as goons, then they have pagas, they have everything. And then if these police shoot one, then it becomes not even the issue of the goon. Now people concentrate on the police officer who shot a person in the process of protecting. But one thing, as I conclude, stood out, that whatever we do, the polling station, the electoral materials, and electoral officials, it is sacred in the electoral process. There is no way we can allow that goons come inside a polling station and start attacking electoral officials, destroying materials that they did in Narok, and also interfere with people coming to vote.
Okay.
We want one goons. Please, that is sacred. We cannot actually allow that to happen in our electoral process. And nobody should be hurt or die because of an election. So we need to have this conversation beyond IBC and agree that every stakeholder, including the citizens themselves, have a responsibility. Why should you accept to be bribed in an election? Why should we be proud to be hired to be a goon and then you move around with pagas? Yeah, I think it's a conversation beyond IBC.
All right, I'll take a quick commercial break. When you come back, we discuss that, plus the reforms that are now needed and the numbers as well. What was the voter turnout in this by-election based on the IBC numbers?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that and the reforms that the IBC requires as we head into 2027. Let's take that quick break here. When we go back in just a short while, keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Citizen Daybreak. See you in just a bit.